At midnight, Isabella Reed stood barefoot in the marble lobby of the Valenti headquarters while armed guards emptied her handbag onto the floor. Bank records showed that the Curvy forensic accountant had transferred $80 million from Don Luca Valenti's private reserve into accounts controlled by his enemies. Luca displayed her security footage before his entire family and called her the thief who had sold them all. At sunrise, the missing money would trigger a debt clause that transferred control of Valenti's shipping to his cousin, Adrian, yet one detail made no sense. The authorization carried Isabella's fingerprint, although security logs proved that she had been locked inside Luca's private dining room at the exact moment it was approved. Isabella refused to explain. She only warned Luca not to restore the money before 4:17 a.m. because whoever had framed her was waiting for him to do exactly that. Then, every computer in the building went black, and a countdown appeared on the lobby wall. At midnight, Isabella Reed stood barefoot beneath the crystal lights of Valenti headquarters, while 3 armed guards emptied her handbag across the marble floor. Her black heels landed beside a lipstick, an insulin-sized emergency glucose kit, 2 sharpened accounting pencils, and the encrypted token that could authorize transfers from Luca Valenti's private reserve. That token silenced the room. Isabella, sus emerald wrap dress, followed the generous curves of her full figure with deliberate elegance. Her auburn hair had loosened over one shoulder, but neither her exposed feet nor the weapons surrounding her made her look diminished. She held herself as she did during hostile audits, shoulders straight, expression controlled, dark eyes measuring every person who refused to meet them. Luca stood 10 feet away beneath the Valenti crest. He wore no jacket, and the sleeves of his white shirt were rolled to his forearms. On any other night, Isabella would have noticed the exhaustion around his eyes before anyone else did. Tonight, he looked at her as if 7 years of trust had become evidence against him. Adrian Valenti, Luca's older cousin and chief operating officer of Valenti Shipping, touched the wall console. A transfer record filled the 40-foot display. 80,000. The money had left Luca's reserve at 11:42 p.m. It had been divided among 6 offshore accounts connected to the Betrayal organization. The family currently fighting the Valentis for control of the Atlantic freight corridor. Authorization: Isabella Reed. Biometric confirmation: Isabella Reed. Encryption token: the device lying on the floor. A murmur passed through the captains gathered around the lobby. She had the means, Adrian said. She had the access, and she knew what would happen if the reserve disappeared tonight. Luca's gaze remained fixed on Isabella. Say it yourself. She glanced toward the cameras in the ceiling corners. Not here. A muscle moved in his jaw. You transferred $80 million to men who have tried to kill me twice this year. You will answer me wherever I choose. At sunrise, Adrian continued, the Belandi debt covenant tests our liquidity. If the reserve is not restored, Valenti Shipping defaults. Control passes to the secondary guarantor. Him. Adrian did not need to say it. Everyone in the lobby knew his name occupied that line of the contract. Luca approached Isabella slowly. Did you authorize this transfer? No. Adrian enlarged the biometric record. A perfect image of Isabella's right index fingerprint appeared beside a verified timestamp. Then explain that, Luca said. I can explain why it cannot be real. Her voice stayed even. At 11:42. I was locked inside your private dining room. Luca's eyes narrowed. 2 guards had sealed her inside during an emergency council discussion because the room contained no external network connection. The entry log confirmed that the door had remained locked from 11:31 until Luca released her at 11:49. Adrian answered before Luca could. She scheduled the transfer in advance. A scheduled order would carry 2 timestamps, Isabella said. This has one. For the first time, uncertainty disturbed the room. Luca noticed it. So did Adrian. Enough technical theater. Adrian said, restore the reserve before the covenant is tested. No. Isabella's refusal struck harder than a shout. Luca stopped directly in front of her. She had spent years quietly preventing his mistakes from becoming disasters. But he had never looked at her with such open contempt. You are in no position to refuse. If you restore that money before 4:17 a.m., the person who created this record will obtain exactly what they need. What do they need? Isabella looked once more at the cameras. Proof that you personally accepted the false account map. Adrian gave a humorless laugh. Convenient, she steals the money, then frightens us out of recovering it. Isabella ignored him. Luca, the reserve is not where this screen says it is. Where is it? She hesitated. 3 nights earlier, an innocent verification call had nearly killed a junior analyst. The young man was now hidden with his wife and daughter, and Isabella had promised that no Valenti soldier would learn his location until she identified who controlled the internal surveillance system. She would not purchase her own safety with his life. I can tell you in this building. Pain flashed across Luca's face before anger buried it. You mean you want her? Every screen in the lobby suddenly went black. The lights remained on, but the elevators stopped. The electronic doors locked, and the guards' radios dissolved into static. Red numbers appeared across the enormous wall display. 04:16:59, the countdown began. Adrian stepped back. She locked us out. No, Isabella whispered, recognizing the audit containment protocol she had designed 2 years earlier. It could activate only after detecting an attempt to overwrite protected financial records. Someone inside the building had just tried to erase the transfer trail. Luca seized the token from the floor and turned to his security chief. Confine her in the record suite. No network access, no visitors, no exceptions. Luca, listen to me and restore every account manually. For the first time that night, Isabella's composure broke. That order will destroy you. Luca held her gaze as the guards closed around her. Then you have 4 hours and 16 minutes to prove you didn't already try. The guards escorted Isabella toward the record suite, while Luca's order spread through the building. Restore every account manually. She heard captains repeating it into secure landlines and financial officers opening sealed procedure binders. No one questioned the command, because no one except Isabella understood that the account map on the lobby screen was itself the weapon. As the record suite door closed behind her, she remembered the first number that had warned her something was wrong. It had appeared 3 days earlier as a discrepancy of 87 cents on Friday morning. Isabella had arrived at Valenti headquarters before sunrise wearing a cream silk blouse, charcoal trousers tailored to her full figure, and the gold earrings her younger sister had given her for her 36th birthday. She preferred the building before Luca's captains, filled it with expensive cologne, guarded conversations, and men who treated accounting as clerical work until the numbers threatened them. At 6:12 a.m., she found the discrepancy inside a routine insurance reconciliation for the Valenti fleet. A junior accountant would have corrected it and moved on. Isabella traced it backward. The 87 cents came from a currency conversion adjustment attached to a dormant loan. That loan belonged to Belandi Capital, which had financed 6 Valenti cargo vessels during a federal seizure crisis 9 years earlier. Luca believed the debt had been reduced to a ceremonial obligation. Isabella knew better. Contracts did not become harmless, merely because powerful men stopped reading them. She opened the original covenant from the fireproof archive. The agreement required Valenti Shipping to maintain a minimum liquid reserve until 8 a.m. on the final business day of every quarter, if the reserve fell below $80 million. Voting control transferred temporarily to the secondary guarantor, Adrian Valenti. Isabella checked the date twice. The quarterly test was Monday morning. She was still reading when Luca entered without knocking, carrying 2 coffees and a folder he had not opened. "Tell me I can sign this," he said. Isabella looked up. Luca, 39, had the hard, composed face that made seasoned captains lower their voices. Yet, with her, he often abandoned the performance of omniscience. He placed her coffee on the left side of the desk, exactly where she preferred it, then waited for her to rescue him from another problem he had delayed understanding. "What is it?" "Expansion agreement. 3 refrigerated warehouses in Newark. You cannot sign it." His eyebrows rose. "You haven't read it. You folded the upper right corner. You do that when Adrian tells you something is urgent." His urgent contracts usually hide maintenance liabilities in the schedules. Luca almost smiled. "That is an unfairly specific accusation. It has also been correct." 4 times she read the agreement. Schedule 7, assigned $16 million in environmental remediation costs to the buyer. Isabella turned the folder toward him and tapped the clause with one red accounting pencil. Luca's amusement vanished. He said, "Those inspections were clean. He may not have seen the amended report. You always give people an innocent explanation first. It prevents me from confusing suspicion with proof." That principle had preserved Luca's legitimate companies through 2 federal audits, a union embezzlement scheme, and a customs investigation initiated by one of his rivals. Isabella's name appeared on none of the public resolutions. Adrian accepted praise for restructuring the compliance division. Luca accepted the belief that his empire functioned because his authority made it function. Only Isabella saw how often it survived because she found the decimal someone else ignored. Luca leaned against her desk. "Come to dinner tonight. Is that an order from my employer?" "No, then ask properly." His gaze softened. "Have dinner with me, Isabella, for one suspended moment." The space between them held everything neither had permitted himself to name. Luca's attention moved over her face, down to the graceful line of her blouse, then returned to her eyes with unmistakable admiration. She wanted to say yes. Instead, she remembered her sister Naomi's message from that morning. The heating system in Naomi's rehabilitation clinic had failed again, and Isabella had promised to negotiate with the landlord after work. "I can tonight." Luca concealed his disappointment badly. "Another man, my sister. That answer is less interesting. It should be more embarrassing for you," he laughed quietly. And Isabella hated how much she loved being the person who could still draw that sound from him. Adrian entered without warning. His silver tie was immaculate, his expression warm enough to pass for affection. At 43, he had spent half his life standing beside Luca in public photographs, presenting himself as the loyal cousin who had surrendered leadership without resentment. "Am I interrupting?" "Yes," Isabella said. "No," Luca answered simultaneously. Adrian's smile tightened. He placed a tablet on her desk. "The external auditors need temporary access to the reserve reconciliation files. I approved it. You lack authority to approve access to Luca's private reserve. I run Valenti shipping. You do not run my controls." Luca picked up his coffee. "Give them what they need." "Isabella, Adrian is trying to close the quarterly report before Monday." It was a small decision, casually made. Luca trusted bloodline over procedure, and Isabella saw no way to challenge him without making an accusation she could not yet support. "Restricted access only," she said. "No export permissions." Adrian inclined his head. Of course, after the men left, Isabella opened the audit access request. The vendor listed on the form was legitimate. The registration number was not. It belonged to an accounting contractor that had ceased operating 11 months earlier. Isabella reached for her red pencil and circled the number. Then she opened the restricted access log. Someone using Adrian's authorization had already entered the reserve system 7 minutes before Luca gave permission. Isabella did not accuse Adrian. She began with the possibility that someone in information technology had reused an expired vendor profile by mistake. It was careless. But large companies survived on a disturbing amount of carelessness disguised as efficiency. At 7:05 a.m., she called Ethan Cole, the 24-year-old systems analyst who maintained access permissions for the finance division, who activated vendor registration C48 wine. Keys clicked softly through the receiver. "Nobody," Ethan said. "It S archived. Look at the live access table." The clicking stopped. "That S impossible. Come to my office. Do not message anyone, and do not bring your company laptop." Ethan arrived 12 minutes later, pale and breathing too quickly. Isabella closed the blinds but left the door open. Being seen alone with a frightened junior employee would invite gossip. Closing the door would make that gossip useful to whoever might already be watching. She handed him a printed copy of the access request. Ethan studied the registration number. This vendor lost its encryption certificate last year. The system should to recognize it, but it did. He compared the live permissions against an offline checksum stored on a read-only maintenance card. The 2 files appeared identical until Isabella pointed to a sequence of 7 repeating digits buried inside the certificate. "Currency rates," she said. Ethan frowned. The digits matched this morning's euro conversion down to 7 decimal places. A legitimate certificate would contain a randomly generated key. Someone built this one today and made it resemble archived data. Why use the exchange rate? Because it changes constantly. It tells them whether the system is generating their false credential in real time. Ethan looked toward the ceiling camera. Isabella noticed. Does that camera record sound? No, but the finance cameras feed through Sentinel. Sentinel security was managed by Marcus Dane, Luca's security chief. Marcus had worked for Luca's father and had carried Luca out of the car after the ambush that killed both his parents. If Marcus was compromised, Isabella could trust almost no physical channel inside the building. She removed a blank reconciliation worksheet from her drawer and wrote one question beneath a column of figures. Can the false credential export data? Ethan wrote his answer under the total. It already exported the reserve architecture at 601. The reserve architecture did not contain money. It contained the map required to move money without triggering the Valenti Bank's automatic fraud controls. Isabella felt cold despite the summer heat pressing against the windows. Disable it quietly. If I revoke the certificate, whoever created it will know we found it. Can you redirect its permissions into a replica environment? A sandbox? One that looks real. Ethan considered it. For a few hours, do it. At 8:20, Luca left the building for a weekend negotiation aboard a Belandi yacht anchored beyond ordinary cellular coverage. He took Adrian, Marcus, and 4 captains with him. Before departing, he paused beside Isabella's desk. You've been avoiding me since breakfast. I've been working. You use work to avoid everything. So do you. His expression suggested he wanted to return to the dinner invitation. Instead, Adrian called from the elevator, and Luca stepped away. Monday morning, Luca said, no excuses. Isabella watched the elevator doors close around him. She nearly followed, but she possessed only an expired registration number and a suspicious access event. If she accused Adrian without proving intent, Luca would confront his cousin. Adrian would erase the intrusion, blame a subcontractor, and learn exactly how much Isabella knew. She chose the safer warning, using an external payphone 2 blocks from headquarters. She called the yacht's independent satellite number, a number known only to Luca, Isabella, and Marcus. Marcus answered. Put Luca on. He's in negotiation. Interrupt him. A pause followed. Is this about the quarterly report? Isabella had not mentioned the quarterly report. She lowered the receiver without answering. The barrier was no longer uncertainty. Whoever controlled the financial intrusion either had access to Marcus or was receiving information directly from him. By Saturday afternoon, Ethan's sandbox recorded 3 unauthorized searches. The intruder requested the reserve balance, Luca's biometric approval rules, and Isabella's personal authorization history. They rebuilding a transaction that looks like yours, Ethan said. Can you trace the request only to Sentinel's internal relay? After that, the source disappears. Isabella copied the access events onto paper, signed each page across the margins, and placed one set in a safe deposit box registered to her sister. She gave Ethan the second set. If anything happens to me, take this to Naomi. Why not Luca? Because Luca's security chief answers his private calls. Ethan swallowed. What do we do about the reserve? We make it impossible to steal. She contacted Helena Ruiz, an attorney who administered a court-supervised restitution fund established after the previous customs case. The fund could legally receive Valenti assets for temporary verification, but activating it required a documented compliance threat and Isabella's token. Helena agreed to prepare a protective transfer without executing it. At 10:14 Sunday night, the sandbox showed the intruder initiating a test transaction. The destination accounts appeared to belong to the Baresi organization, but Isabella traced their routing codes through public shipping liens. All 6 were controlled by Belandi S Restructuring Division. The transfer was not designed to enrich Luca's enemies. It was designed to trigger the debt covenant and deliver Valenti shipping to Adrian. Isabella reached for the encrypted phone she kept in her apartment. Before she could call Luca, Ethan sent her a photograph. His apartment door stood open. A smear of blood marked the frame. Beneath the image were 6 words. They know about the replica system. A second message arrived from Ethan's number. It contained Isabella's home address, Naomi's clinic schedule, and a live photograph of her sister leaving work. Then the sender wrote, "Move the reserve, and they live. Warn Luca, and choose which one dies first." Isabella read the threat twice, then called Naomi. Her sister answered on the third ring. "You promised you wouldn't work all weekend. Where are you?" Walking to my car. Isabella could hear traffic. Naomi's keys, and another set of footsteps maintaining the same pace behind her. "Go back inside the clinic," Isabella said. "Tell reception you forgot your medication. Do not look behind you." "What's wrong?" "Nothing yet. Call Helena Ruiz from the office phone and wait for her." Naomi trusted the tone Isabella had used through years of hospital appointments, landlord disputes, and the long rehabilitation after the car accident that had damaged Naomi's spine. She did not argue. Isabella then called Helena. "Execute the protective transfer." Helena hesitated. "Once the reserve enters the restitution fund, it remains restricted until our verification cycle completes at 4:17 a.m. I know. If Valenti shipping is tested while the money is restricted, the covenant test is at 8. We have time." "Does Luca approve?" No silence. Helena understood both the legal risk and the personal one. "I need your token and a documented compliance threat." Isabella uploaded the false vendor certificate, the reserve access records, and the routing codes linking the supposed Barisi account to Belandi Capital. At 10:31 p.m., she used her encrypted token to move the full reserve into the court-supervised restitution account. That was the true action the conspirators needed. The money left Luca's control by Isabella's hand. Without his permission, she recorded a statement explaining why, encrypted it, and scheduled copies for release at 4:18 1 minute after Helena's verification cycle would authenticate the destination and prevent anyone from substituting a false account map. Then Isabella drove to Valenti headquarters. Ethan's phone sent her instructions throughout the journey. Enter through the main lobby, carry the token, speak to no one. At 11:18, a final message appeared. Private dining room, alone. Luca had returned early from the yacht and called an emergency council meeting after Marcus reported irregular activity in the reserve system. When Isabella reached the 42nd floor, Marcus took her phone at the security checkpoint. His face revealed nothing. "Luca wants you inside." "Where is Ethan Cole?" "I don't know who that is." It was the wrong answer. Ethan's personnel file showed that Marcus had authorized his security clearance 6 months earlier. Isabella entered the dining room. Luca stood at the far end of the long walnut table. Adrian occupied the chair to his right. 3 captains watched from the walls. "Did you access the private reserve tonight?" Luca asked. "Yes." "Why?" "I found an unauthorized credential inside the audit system." Adrian slid a printed report across the table. "The credential was issued from her workstation. After you approved a dead vendor's access request, I approved a legitimate auditor. Then you did not verify the registration number." Luca struck the table once with his palm. "Where is my money?" Isabella looked at the black dome camera above the door. "Not here." She had warned him later in the lobby. Now, before the accusation had become public, she tried once more. "Clear the room. Remove every electronic device. Then I will show you the original routing chain." Adrian leaned back. "She wants us to disable the only objective witnesses. I want to know who is listening." Luca's stare hardened. "You are accusing my security. I am telling you your private satellite number is compromised." Marcus stepped forward. "That number has never left my custody." Exactly the insult to Marcus landed as Isabella knew it would. Luca's parents had died because of a security failure. Marcus' loyalty afterward had become sacred, and Luca treated doubt toward him as doubt toward the dead. At 11:31, Luca ordered everyone out except Isabella. The dining room door locked automatically behind the departing guards. The room had no network access, a precaution established years earlier for sensitive negotiations. For 11 minutes, Isabella told Luca everything she could without naming Ethan or exposing Naomi. She showed him the expired vendor registration. She explained the sandbox and the Belandi routing codes. She told him the reserve was protected and would become verifiable at 4:17. Protected where? If I say it before I know who controls the cameras, 2 innocent people may die. People you trust more than me, people who are in danger because they helped me protect you. His expression changed, but before he could answer, The door unlocked. Adrian entered, carrying a tablet. The screen showed a new transfer stamped 11:42 p.m., a time when Isabella had been locked in the room. Her legitimate 1031 transfer had vanished. In its place stood 6 payments to accounts labeled as Berezi Holdings. Her biometric confirmation appeared beside each one. Luca looked from the screen to Isabella. "You said the money was protected. It is, then prove it." She could not until Helena's verification completed. Any early disclosure would identify the restitution account, allowing the conspirators to challenge or freeze it before authentication. Adrian ordered guards to search her. They found the physical token in her handbag. By midnight, Luca had assembled the captains in the lobby. Her shoes were removed because Marcus claimed the heels might conceal a storage device. Her belongings were scattered across the floor, and the false transfer was displayed before everyone who had once depended on her judgment. When the systems went black, Luca ordered her confined in the record suite and commanded his officers to restore the accounts manually. At 12:26 a.m., Marcus returned with a confession prepared for her signature. Isabella tore it in half. Luca stood behind him. "Sign it, and I will guarantee your sister's safety." The offer told Isabella that someone had finally mentioned Naomi to him, but not why Naomi was in danger. "You cannot guarantee her safety while Marcus controls your information." Luca's face emptied. He turned to the guards. "Move her to the Riverside property. Keep her there until the reserve is recovered." That was not protection. It was public judgment rendered before the proof arrived. Isabella did not plead as they escorted her through the underground garage. She entered the rear of an armored sedan under her own power. Refusing Marcus' offered hand, the convoy departed at 12:41. 9 minutes later, the lead vehicle stopped beneath an overpass after receiving a security alert from headquarters. The rear escort blocked the road behind them. Both orders came through Marcus' encrypted channel. The sedan's driver turned toward Isabella and drew a pistol. She had already removed the metal accounting clip concealed inside the lining of her dress. She drove its pointed end into the emergency belt release, dropped sideways across the seat as the shot shattered the window, and forced open the damaged door with both hands. She rolled onto the wet pavement, pain tearing through her shoulder, then crawled behind the concrete barrier as gunfire erupted between men wearing identical Valenti uniforms. By the time Luca's independent recovery team reached the overpass, the sedan was burning. There was blood on the road, there was no body, and on Luca's phone, a message from Isabella's number contained only one sentence. "You chose the thief, now watch him inherit everything." Luca reached the overpass at 1:07 a.m. Rain hissed against the burning sedan, while his independent recovery team searched the concrete drainage channels below the highway. One driver was dead. The second had disappeared. 2 escort guards lay wounded beside vehicles whose tracking systems showed no deviation from their assigned route. Marcus stood near the wreckage, issuing orders. Adrian remained at headquarters, attempting to restore the reserve before the Covenant test. Luca looked at the blood on the pavement and understood that both men were behaving exactly as he had instructed them to behave. That realization offered no comfort. "Whose order stopped the convoy?" he asked. Marcus held out his encrypted radio. "The alert carried my authorization, but I did not send it." "And the rear vehicle?" "Same authorization." The security chief blamed a cloned command key. 40 minutes earlier, he had insisted that such a breach was impossible when Isabella questioned the satellite line. Luca crouched beside the open rear door. The seatbelt had been released from inside. A bent metal accounting clip lay beneath the vehicle. Isabella had not waited for rescue. She had saved herself. A recovery officer approached. "The blood trail ends at the eastern barrier. She may have gone over." Luca examined the marks, 3 heavy drops near the sedan, then smaller stains continuing parallel to the barrier. "None crossed it. She didn't jump, sir?" "Isabella hates heights. It was not weakness." Years earlier, after Naomi's accident, Isabella had refused even the glass elevator in Luca's hotel because she could see the traffic 30 floors below. If wounded and pursued, she would choose concealment on solid ground before an unmeasured fall into darkness. That was the first contradiction. The woman accused of abandoning everyone she loved had left a deliberate trail to make her attackers believe she had gone over the barrier. Luca stood. Search east along the maintenance road quietly. Marcus remains here. Marcus's expression tightened. You think I'm involved. I think somebody uses your authority better than you do. At 2:10, Luca returned to headquarters. Without Isabella, the finance floor had collapsed into competing commands. One officer tried to reverse the 6 false payments. Another attempted to borrow funds against a Valenti warehouse already pledged as collateral. Adrian had called 3 lenders, revealing the liquidity crisis to institutions that would profit from spreading it. For 7 years, Luca had mistaken Isabella as calm for simplicity. He saw now that her quiet had been the structure holding louder people upright. Status, he demanded. Adrian turned from the central terminal. We can replace 52 million before sunrise. The remaining 28 requires your personal guarantee. Against what? The Newark warehouses, the same warehouses carrying 16 million in undisclosed environmental liability. Adrian paused. Isabella had found that clause in under 4 minutes. We have no alternative, Adrian said. At 3:02, Luca entered the private dining room alone and reconstructed the accusation minute by minute. Isabella had been locked inside from 11:31 until 11:49. The disputed transfer was recorded at 11:42. Adrian's theory required a scheduled order, but Isabella had identified the technical flaw immediately. A scheduled transfer carried both a creation time and an execution time. This record contained only one. Luca requested the raw transaction header from an offline bank terminal. The display showed something else the lobby screen had concealed. The authorization token had not communicated with the bank at 11:42. It had communicated at 10:31 before Isabella entered headquarters. Someone had rewritten the visible time and destination after the legitimate instruction was sent. That was the second contradiction. At 4:17, the countdown vanished. Every terminal rebooted simultaneously. A court verification certificate appeared in Luca's secure inbox, issued by attorney Helena Ruiz. It confirmed that the entire $80 million reserve had entered a supervised restitution account at 10:31 and remained intact. The 6 alleged Berezi accounts had never received $1. 1 minute later, Isabella's scheduled statement arrived. Her voice filled Luca's office. If you are hearing this, someone replaced the original account map and prevented me from presenting the verification safely. Do not restore funds using the displayed destinations. They are controlled through Belandi Capital. Any manual payment will be treated as Luca's acceptance of the false ledger and may activate the covenant's fraud provision. Luca stopped breathing. He had ordered his people to do precisely that. How much was restored? He asked when Adrian entered. 24 million. To which accounts? Adrian did not answer quickly enough. Luca crossed the room and seized the reconciliation report. All 24 million had gone through the 6 false destinations. Belandi Capital could now argue that Luca had personally acknowledged the fabricated debt structure. Adrian recovered. Isabella designed this. Her message proves she knew what would happen. No, it proves she warned me. She moved the reserve without permission and kept every dollar under court supervision. Adrian's composure cracked for less than a second. The covenant has already been triggered. We need an emergency succession vote before the market opens. Too fast, no independent notice of default had arrived. Yet Adrian already knew which remedy Belandi would demand. That was the third contradiction. Luca did not accuse him. Isabella's discipline returned to him. Suspicion was not proof. Instead, Luca created 2 pieces of controlled information. He told Adrian that Ethan Cole had survived and hidden the original access records inside Naomi's rehabilitation clinic. He separately told Marcus that Helena Ruiz possessed the only copy in her downtown law office. Both claims were false. At 4:46, Luca's private observers reported that 2 men had left a Valenti security garage and driven toward Naomi's clinic. Their departure credentials belonged to Marcus, but the vehicle request had been entered from Adrian's office. Marcus supplied the means. Adrian chose the target. Luca ordered his observers to follow without intervening unless Naomi was threatened. The men searched a locked administrative room, found nothing, and called an unregistered number. The call lasted 11 seconds before the phone was destroyed, but the vehicle they used carried a fleet maintenance tag Isabella had introduced after discovering fuel theft the previous year. The tag recorded every ignition cycle independently of Sentinel. Before heading to the clinic, the vehicle had stopped for 23 minutes at an abandoned payroll office near the East River. Helena recognized the address when Luca showed it to her. That office closed after the customs restitution case, she said. Isabella kept its paper archive because nobody else understood the settlement. Would she go there? Not if she believed your people were hunting her. Luca's guilt deepened. Helena studied him, deciding whether he deserved the next piece of information. Ethan Cole called me at 1:32, she finally said. He is alive. Isabella hid him and his family before she came to headquarters. Where? He refused to tell me, but he asked for the medical supply code Naomi uses when the clinic transfers a patient without generating an insurance record. Luca looked again at the vehicle S route. The abandoned payroll office shared a service alley with a closed outpatient annex, once operated by Naomi's clinic. Isabella had been wounded within 2 miles of it. Luca took his coat. Helena blocked the doorway. If you find her, she may not go with you. She shouldn't. It was the first honest answer he had given all night. At 5:21 a.m., Luca left his armed escort behind and entered the service alley alone. A light was burning beneath the outpatient annex door. On the wet pavement outside lay one broken gold earring, the mate to the pair Isabella had worn on Friday morning. Luca picked up the broken earring and entered the annex. The waiting room smelled of antiseptic and damp plaster. Half the ceiling lights had been removed and plastic sheeting covered the reception desk. The clinic had closed 6 months earlier, but an emergency generator hummed somewhere below the floor. Ethan Cole stood behind the inner door, with a revolver held in both trembling hands. "Put it down," Luca said. "You put yours down first." Luca removed the pistol from beneath his coat and placed it on the floor. Then he kicked it, beyond his own reach. Ethan lowered his weapon only slightly. "Let him in," Isabella called from the treatment room. She sat upright on an examination table, while Naomi wrapped her left shoulder. The emerald dress had been cut away from the injury and covered with a gray clinic robe. Rain had dried in her loosened auburn hair. A dark bruise spread along her right knee, and several shallow cuts marked her cheek, but the bullet had only grazed the outer muscle of her shoulder before breaking the car window. Lucas' relief struck so violently that he had to stop in the doorway. "Isabella did not offer him the same mercy. You came alone?" she asked. "Yes." "Did Marcus assign your vehicle?" "No. Helena drove me within 2 blocks. Did you bring a company phone?" "I left it at headquarters." "Watch." He removed it and placed it beside a tray of bloodied gauze. Naomi checked the back casing for a transmitter before setting it inside a metal instrument cabinet. Only then did Isabella look directly at Luca. "You found the court certificate?" "Yes. And the original token time, yes. So you know I didn't steal from you." "I know, but you announced that I had the truth permitted no defense." "Yes, you ordered armed men to remove me after I told you your security was compromised." "Yes." Naomi's hands tightened around the bandage. Luca forced himself not to soften the admission with explanations. "I was wrong. You were worse than wrong. You trusted my work whenever it increased your power. But you did not trust me when believing me cost you something." He accepted that too. Isabella slid carefully from the examination table. Pain crossed her face when her left foot touched the floor, but she steadied herself without reaching for Luca. Naomi moved to help. Isabella raised one hand and tested her balance first. "I can walk," she said. "I cannot lift with this arm, and I cannot move quickly. Plan." Accordingly, even injured, she converted weakness into usable information. Luca felt shame at how many years he had valued that precision, without recognizing the courage beneath it. Ethan locked the treatment room door. "We should leave. 2 black Savs passed the alley 5 minutes ago. They belong to Marcus," Luca said. "No," Isabella answered. "They are registered to a shell contractor, but Marcus controls the fuel cards." Luca looked toward the covered windows. "They followed me. They expected you to investigate once the court certificate appeared. You were the bait, and I led them here." Yes, she did not waste time punishing him further. Isabella opened a paper site plan across the examination table. She had marked 3 exits in red pencil. The front and rear doors opened into the same alley, making them easy to contain. The third route passed through the basement supply corridor into the abandoned payroll office next door. "We leave through the corridor," Luca said. "No, that is what they expect. The office vehicle stopped there earlier. They know the buildings connect. What do you propose? We make them believe we used it." She instructed Ethan to switch off the treatment room lights and activate the payroll office emergency exit alarm from the annex breaker panel. Naomi wheeled an empty supply cart into the basement elevator and tied Luca's discarded coat over it where the corridor camera could capture the shape but not a face. Luca listened without overriding her. When the alarm sounded next door, footsteps pounded away from the annex entrance. Isabella waited 30 seconds, then opened a narrow service door behind the imaging room. It led to a covered loading bay used for medical waste collection. Helena was waiting there in an unmarked sedan. The escape was not luck. Isabella had asked her to circle the block every 8 minutes and stop only if the annex lights blinked twice. Luca helped Naomi support Isabella into the back seat, careful not to touch her injured shoulder. He took the front passenger seat and left his pistol behind. Helena drove them to a private apartment above her law office. It had no connection to Valenti property and no electronic security system Marcus could access. At 6:04 a.m., Isabella finally explained the first complete layer of the conspiracy. "Adrian does not need to steal the reserve," she said. "He needs the reserve to appear missing during the covenant test. The Belandi agreement gives the secondary guarantor temporary control of Valenti shipping if liquidity falls below 80 million. Temporary, Luca said, unless fraud contributed to the default. Then control remains with the guarantor until an independent board investigation ends. The 24 million I restored through the false destinations creates evidence that you accepted the fraudulent ledger. Adrian can argue that you participated or were too compromised to remain chief executive." Luca paced once across the small room. "Why frame you instead of simply manipulating the balance? Because I am the only officer authorized to certify the reserve before the board if I disappear as a suspected thief. Adrian becomes the most senior financial witness, and Marcus supplies access, surveillance, transportation, and a believable security narrative. I don't know whether he is Adrian's partner or being coerced." Ethan placed a printed access log on the table. The fake vendor certificate originated through Sentinel, but it was generated from Adrian's office that connects them to the intrusion, Luca said. "Not to the objective," Isabella replied. "They can blame a technician. We still need proof that Adrian knowingly controlled the destination accounts and arranged the false restoration." Luca understood the difference. Suspicion could start a war. Proof could end one. "The board meets at 8, he said. "Cancel the vote." "We cannot." Everyone looked at Isabella if Luca refuses to attend. "The covenant allows Adrian to assume emergency control uncontested. If the board postpones, Belandi can petition a commercial judge and freeze the shipping company. The vote must happen. Then we expose him there. Not yet. He still believes I'm wounded, isolated, and hated by you. That is our only advantage." The words injured more than Luca expected because they were true. "What do you need from me?" Isabella studied him for a long moment. "Publicly maintain the accusation. Tell the board I manipulated the court transfer and that you are prepared to surrender temporary control." Naomi stared at her. "After what he did to you, you want him to humiliate you again?" "No." Isabella's eyes remained on Luca. "I want to know whether he can obey a plan he did not create." Luca had commanded armies of men who feared disappointing him. No one had ever made his obedience a condition of trust. "What happens when Adrian believes he has won?" he asked. "He will move the 24 million out of Belandi's receiving structure before an independent examiner can trace it. To do that, he must use an account he truly controls, and we follow it. If you follow my instructions exactly." Luca inclined his head. For the first time, it was not permission, it was submission to her judgment. "You lead," he said. "I follow." A telephone rang inside Helena's locked office below. Only 4 people possessed that number. Helena answered through the speaker system without identifying herself. Adrian's voice entered the apartment. The board has moved the vote to 7:30. If Luca is not seated when the doors close, Valenti shipping becomes mine. Adrian's deadline left them 86 minutes. Isabella asked Helena to place the call on mute, then wrote 3 columns across a legal pad. What we know, what we can prove, what he must still do. Under the first heading, she listed Adrian's motive, Marcus access, the false certificate, the manipulated transfer record, and the ambush. Under the second, the list was shorter. The court certificate proved that the reserve had never reached the Berezi organization. The raw bank header proved that Isabella's token communicated at 10:31, not 11:42. Ethan's offline maintenance card proved that a false vendor credential had entered through Sentinel. The fleet tag proved that a vehicle requested from Adrian's office carried Marcus men to Naomi's clinic. Enough to expose the accusation as false, Luca said. Not enough to prove Adrian created it, Isabella replied. He will say Marcus acted alone. Marcus will say his credentials were cloned. Belandi will claim its accounts received your manual payments in good faith. Helena ended the muted call without responding to Adrian. What does he still need? She asked. Isabella opened a paper copy of the 9-year-old covenant. To assume control, the secondary guarantor must demonstrate independent liquidity equal to 10% of the shipping company's outstanding secured debt. 40 million, Luca said. Held by the same legal entity named in the original agreement. Adrian cannot substitute another company without delaying the vote for 10 business days, and delay gives us time to expose him. Which means he must use Valenti Continuity Trust. Luca recognized the name. His father had created the trust after the first federal investigation. Adrian became its sole beneficiary when he agreed to serve as secondary guarantor. Isabella drew a line between 2 figures. The false Berezi destinations and Valenti Continuity Trust used different banks, different directors, and different registered addresses. But each account paid a quarterly administration fee of 87 cents to the same dormant contractor. The discrepancy Isabella had found on Friday was not an error. It was the fee binding Adrian's legitimate guarantor trust to the hidden receiving structure. Ethan leaned over the page. A recurring payment proves a common administrator, not common ownership. Correct, Isabella said. We need the trust's current beneficial control certificate. It will identify the administrator and the signing authority. Adrian must submit it at the vote. Then we wait for him to submit it, Naomi said. He will submit a clean copy, Helena answered. The board will not inspect the bank metadata behind it. Isabella tapped the red pencil against the legal pad. So we make him move the money. Their countertrap used no new software and depended on no intercepted confession. Luca called Adrian from Helena's office line at 6:19. My search team found Isabella's hiding place, he said. In the apartment above, Isabella listened through a separate analog extension. Is she alive? Adrian asked. The question came without surprise. For now, she claims the court account contains only 56 million. She says the other 24 was routed through Belandi and can still be frozen. Adrian was silent. Luca continued. Following Isabella's written script, the independent examiner will trace those destinations when the board convenes. Move the money into the continuity trust before 7:15. If I surrender control, I want the funds inside the family. It sounded like a frightened leader asking his more competent cousin to conceal an embarrassing transfer. It also offered Adrian exactly what he wanted. Luca's apparent cooperation and a reason to consolidate the 24 million under the trust he had to reveal at the vote. You finally understand the situation, Adrian said. Do it. After the call ended, Helena prepared a notarized record of Luca's false instruction, including the exact amount, deadline, and destination. Ethan sealed one copy with the offline access logs. Naomi photographed every page using a disposable camera, then placed the film in an addressed courier envelope. If they disable the building systems again, Isabella said, the paper survives. If they seize the papers, the film leaves with a bicycle courier at 7:10. The fallback did not rely on Valenti security, electronic storage, or Helena remaining free at 6:31. Luca returned to headquarters. Before leaving, he stopped beside Isabella. She had changed into a black dress from Helena's closet, its soft fabric fitting her full curves without pressing against the bandage beneath her left sleeve. Naomi had pinned her hair up to keep it away from the cuts on her cheek. "You should remain here," Luca said. That sounded dangerously like an order. It was concern. Learn to express it without deciding for me. He accepted the correction. "Will you remain here until the trust documents are presented, and then I decide." Luca wanted to tell her that the sight of blood beside the burning car had shown him how completely she occupied his life. He did not. Fear was not restitution, and love confessed during guilt could become another demand placed upon her. Instead, he said, "I will follow the plan at headquarters." Luca entered the board chamber at 7:02. 21 directors sat around the black oval table. Representatives from Belandi Capital occupied the observer gallery. Marcus stood beside the main doors, apparently restored to Luca's confidence. Adrian approached with practiced sympathy. "You look exhausted. I spent the night chasing a woman who betrayed me. And did you find her?" "Yes." Luca allowed bitterness to enter his voice. "She still believes I will choose her over my family." Adrian smiled. At 7:11, Ethan confirmed through the court fund's incoming payment line that the first of the 6 false destination accounts had begun emptying. The funds were moving toward Valenti Continuity Trust exactly as Isabella predicted. Level 1 evidence proved that Isabella had been framed. Level 2 connected Adrian and Marcus to the access and pursuit. The controlled transfer was building Level 3, but it still required Adrian's signed trust certificate to establish that he knowingly received the money. At 7:18, Adrian placed a sealed folder before the board secretary. "The guarantor's proof of liquidity," he announced. Inside Helena's apartment, Isabella listened over the board's public compliance line. The secretary broke the seal, then stopped. "This certificate identifies Marcus Dane as the trust-authorized transaction officer." For the first time, Adrian lost control of his expression. He turned toward the doors. Marcus was gone. Adrian recovered before anyone else understood the significance of Marcus's name. He lifted the trust certificate from the secretary's hands and studied it with theatrical disbelief. "This document proves Marcus deceived both of us," he said to Luca. "He controlled the receiving accounts. He manipulated your security system. He framed Isabella, then attempted to kill her before she could identify him." The explanation was fast, clean, and almost persuasive. Marcus had possessed the necessary access. His authorization appeared on the convoy diversion, the vehicle request, the false vendor relay. And now the trust certificate. If Adrian sacrificed him, every trace could be made to end with a disgraced security chief who had conveniently fled. One Belandi representative rose from the observer gallery. "Whatever internal betrayal occurred, the liquidity default remains. The board must vote." Luca looked at the chamber clock. 7:20. The controlled transfer should have finished. Instead, Ethan's verification code had not arrived. Adrian gave no sign that anything was wrong. "You asked me to bring the restored funds into the family trust," he said. I attempted to comply. Marcus intercepted the order. It was the first adjustment to their trap. Adrian had moved only 6 million of the 24. He had left the remaining 18 scattered across the false destinations and prepared to blame Marcus for redirecting the partial transfer. 6 million established movement, but not full control. Adrian could argue that he had acted on Luca's instruction in good faith. Luca had to make him finish. He rose before the board last night. "I accused Isabella Reed of stealing the Valenti reserve." Several directors shifted uncomfortably. Adrian watched with calm expectation. Luca forced himself to repeat the injury he had already inflicted. "Her court transfer was unauthorized. Her investigation concealed from me. Her conduct placed this company at risk. I no longer recognize her as an officer of Valenti Shipping, and I will not rely upon any statement she makes." The words entered the board as permanent minutes. At Helena's apartment, Isabella listened through the compliance line without moving. Naomi stood beside her, furious even though they had planned every sentence. Luca continued, "For the stability of this family, I am prepared to recognize Adrian as temporary controller provided the entire restored amount is secured inside Valenti Continuity Trust before the vote." Adrian turned toward the Valenti representatives. The senior representative checked his phone, then nodded. At 7:23, Ethan's paper transaction monitor began printing confirmation pages. The remaining 18 million was leaving the 6 false destination accounts. It worked, Naomi whispered. No, Isabella said. The transfer references were wrong. Instead of moving directly into Valenti Continuity Trust, each payment passed through a newly created Belandi settlement account. The extra step allowed Adrian to claim that Belandi had recovered disputed funds independently and later deposited them into the trust as part of the covenant remedy. He had created legal distance between himself and the false accounts. We can still show the sequence, Ethan said. Sequence proves coordination, not ownership. Isabella read the receiving code again. The settlement account had been opened that morning after the conspiracy had begun, but before Luca fed Adrian the false instruction. Belandi had prepared a contingency for exactly this kind of scrutiny. Adrian had not merely adapted. He had expected Luca to doubt Isabella eventually. Downstairs, the law office alarm began to ring. Helena checked the mechanical camera viewer beside the apartment door. Marcus. He stood in the lobby with 2 armed men and Ethan's mother beside him. Mrs. Cole wore her nightclothes beneath a borrowed coat. One man held her by the arm. Ethan went white. Marcus looked directly into the camera and held up a handwritten message. Bring the original logs. Come alone. The electronic copies would not convict anyone without Ethan authenticating the offline maintenance card. Marcus did not need to destroy every record. He needed to take the witness who could explain them. I'm going down, Ethan said. No, Isabella replied. That's my mother, and you walking into the lobby gives him both of you. Isabella asked Helena for the building's fire plan. The apartment's second staircase opened into a courtyard, but Marcus had stationed 1 man outside it. The roof connected to no neighboring structure. They could remain barricaded, but the board vote would occur in less than 5 minutes. Marcus' voice came through the intercom. Ethan has 60 seconds. After that, his mother pays for Isabella's decisions. Isabella took the offline card and slipped it beneath the bandage, wrapping her shoulder. Naomi saw the motion. Absolutely not. He wants Ethan because he thinks Ethan is the only person who can authenticate the card. You were shot 3 hours ago. Grazed, you can barely raise your arm. I don't need to. Isabella instructed Ethan to make a duplicate maintenance printout without the original checksum. Helena sealed it inside an evidence envelope. Then Isabella called Marcus through the intercom. I have the logs. Release Mrs. Cole into the elevator. When she reaches us, I come down. Marcus laughed once. You still think you negotiate from a position of value. I am the woman Adrian needs blamed for the missing reserve. If I appear alive before the board, his story becomes harder to control. That makes me more valuable than Ethan's mother. A pause confirmed that she had calculated correctly. Mrs. Cole entered the elevator. When the doors opened upstairs, Ethan pulled her inside. At the same moment, Isabella entered the apartment S service elevator with the false evidence envelope. Naomi caught the door before it closed. If you go down there, Marcus takes you. That is what he must believe. Helena handed Isabella a small brass key. It opened the elevator's maintenance panel. The building had been constructed before electronic controls. Between the 3rd and 2nd floors, Isabella could stop the car manually and exit through the service hatch into the records mezzanine. It was narrow work, but she did not need to climb or crawl. The hatch opened level with a maintenance platform, wide enough for her body. She stepped through carefully, protecting her injured shoulder, while the empty elevator continued to the lobby, carrying only the envelope. Marcus' men entered when the doors opened. By the time they realized Isabella was not inside, she had crossed the mezzanine and exited through Helena's document delivery entrance onto the next street. A bicycle courier waited there with the photographic film. Isabella took his spare helmet and the sealed packet. She could not safely ride with her injured shoulder, so the courier drove while she sat behind him. One arm secured around his waist and both feet planted on the passenger rests. Valenti headquarters was 6 blocks away. Inside the board chamber, the final 18 million entered the continuity trust at 7:27. Adrian submitted the completed liquidity statement. The secretary distributed the succession ballots. Luca had no message from Isabella, Ethan, or Helena. The compliance line had gone silent when Marcus entered the building. He did not know whether their evidence had survived. Adrian signed the acceptance form. "Once the board votes," he said quietly, "everything that happened tonight becomes your failure." Luca looked toward the chamber doors. No one came. The chairman began calling names. One by one, directors voted to transfer control. When the 10th vote was cast for Adrian, only Luca's ballot remained. A vote in Adrian's favor would make the decision unanimous and trigger the trust's full authority immediately. A vote against him would reveal Luca's deception before Isabella secured level 3 proof. Luca marked Adrian's name. The chairman reached for the corporate seal. At that instant, the chamber doors opened. Isabella stood on the threshold in a black dress, one shoulder bandaged beneath the fabric and dried blood visible along her cheek. 21 directors, 6 Belandi representatives, and every Valenti captain turned toward the woman Luca had publicly branded a thief. She held up the sealed film packet. "Before you give him the company," she said, "ask Adrian why he transferred $24 million in response to instructions that never existed." The chairman froze with the corporate seal suspended above the acceptance form. Adrian faced Isabella without rising. "You should be in custody." "I was," she said. "Your men tried to make it permanent." A ripple of unease moved around the board table. Adrian recovered his composure. Marcus Dane arranged the ambush. His name appears on the trust certificate. Whatever fantasy you constructed while hiding does not change the evidence. Isabella walked into the chamber at a measured pace. The motorcycle journey had reopened one cut on her cheek, and pain tightened her shoulder with every step, but she did not hurry. She would not let the room interpret physical limitation as fear. She placed the film packet before the board's secretary. Those photographs were taken before Luca contacted Adrian. They preserve the false vendor credential, the original token header, the fleet request from Adrian's office, and every transaction generated by the controlled transfer. "Controlled transfer?" the chairman asked. Luca stood. "At 6:19 I gave Adrian false information," he said. "I told him Isabella had hidden part of the reserve and that an examiner was about to freeze $24 million. I instructed him to move that exact amount into Valenti Continuity Trust." Adrian spread his hands. "Then you have explained the transfers yourself." "I followed Luca's order." "No," Isabella said. "You claimed Marcus intercepted the order and acted without your knowledge." Adrian's expression hardened. "You cannot have both defenses. Either you knowingly transmitted Luca's instruction to Marcus, or Marcus independently discovered a conversation conducted over Helena Ruiz's private analog line. The distinction is irrelevant. It becomes relevant when we examine the trust rules." Isabella asked the secretary to turn to the final page of Adrian's liquidity certificate. A footnote identified Marcus as transaction officer. Adrian remained the sole beneficiary. Valenti Continuity Trust requires dual approval for any incoming transfer above $5 million, she said. The transaction officer verifies the source. The sole beneficiary certifies that the funds are not proceeds of fraud. Adrian shook his head. "That provision was removed years ago. That is the amended copy in your private archive." Helena entered behind Isabella, carrying a certified folder. "This is the version filed with the Federal Customs Settlement Court. 9 years ago," she said. "No valid amendment was ever registered." The Belandi representatives began whispering among themselves. Isabella continued. "Marcus could initiate the payments, but he could not accept them into the trust without Adrian's approval." Adrian certified all 6 sources at 7:26. The board secretary examined the transaction pages. The beneficiary code is present on each one. Adrian leaned forward. "A code can be stolen. That was why we used 6 accounts," Isabella said. Luca's false instruction mentioned only the total amount and the destination trust. It did not identify the 6 receiving accounts displayed during Isabella's accusation. Those account numbers existed only inside the compromised map and Belandi's private settlement structure. Yet Adrian had certified each source individually. He had not merely received $24 million. He had demonstrated prior knowledge of every account used to frame Isabella. That was the controlled information trap. Adrian looked toward the Belandi gallery. Your systems supplied those numbers. The senior representative immediately stood. Belandi Capital did not authorize fraudulent transfers. You opened the settlement account this morning at the request of Valenta Continuity Trust. Whose request? Isabella asked. The representative hesitated. Helena placed another certified page on the table. The account opening instruction was submitted at 5:52 a.m. before Luca contacted Adrian. It carries Adrian Valenti's personal commercial signature. The room went silent. The evidence now came from independent sources. The court-filed trust rules, Belandi's account opening record, the offline access logs, the controlled transfers, and Adrian S6 beneficiary approvals. Together they proved objective. Access, foreknowledge, and participation. Adrian rose slowly. None of this proves Isabella did not create the scheme and offer it to me. It was an intelligent final defense. If Isabella and Adrian were partners, the evidence could implicate them both. She had anticipated it. The court account contains my recorded protective instruction from 1031, she said. It includes the original destination, the reason for the transfer, and the checksum of Ethan S. offline maintenance card. It was created before the false map existed and held by an independent attorney. Adrian could not alter it. And the fingerprint at 1142, a director asked. A copied biometric template, Ethan said from the doorway. He entered with Naomi and Mrs. Cole behind him. Helena's courier had delivered the offline card to a commercial examiner across the street before Isabella reached headquarters. The examiner's written verification accompanied Ethan. The template came from the private dining room access panel, Ethan explained. Every time Isabella entered, the panel cached her fingerprint for 7 minutes. Marcus exported that cache through Sentinel, but he made one mistake. He reused the same template twice. Real scans never produce identical pressure patterns. The impossible timestamp was no longer a mystery. Isabella had physically been in the dining room. Her biometric data had been somewhere else. Adrian's hand moved inside his jacket. Luca stepped between him and Isabella, but no shot came. The chamber lights went out. Marcus's contingency had begun. Emergency locks sealed the exits, and the board's public line went dead. In the darkness, someone overturned a chair. A Belandi representative shouted. Adrian moved toward the secretary's table. Reaching for the signed ballots and trust certificate, Isabella remained still. Do not use the electronic exits, she called. Marcus controls them. The mechanical release is beneath the chairman's side of the table. She knew because she had reviewed the building's emergency liability expenses 2 years earlier and forced management to install a non-electronic override after discovering the fire doors depended on Sentinel. Luca found the lever and pulled it. The chamber doors released. His independent recovery officers were waiting outside. He had stationed them there before the vote, beyond Marcus's command structure, with written instructions to enter if the lights failed. They restrained Adrian before he reached the documents. 2 floors below, officers intercepted Marcus at the emergency control room. The fleet tag on his vehicle had allowed Luca's team to track his return from Helena's building. Marcus had attempted to erase the board records, unaware that paper copies and photographic film had already left the premises. When the emergency lights came on, Adrian was on his knees beside the table he had expected to inherit. The chairman tore the succession ballot in half. Luca did not look at his cousin. He looked at Isabella. Then, before the same directors and captains who had watched him condemn her, he removed the Valenti signet from his hand and placed it on the table in front of her. Isabella Reed protected this company while I gave its thief my authority, he said. The accusation against her was false. The disgrace belongs to me. The Valenti board suspended Adrian before the sun rose. Helena delivered the certified evidence to federal financial investigators and the county prosecutor through Valenti Shipping, the legitimate corporate counsel. The case did not depend on a mafia confession or a frightened witness changing sides. It rested on bank records, court filings, dual authorization certificates, offline access logs, vehicle data, and the documented attempt on Isabella's life. Belandi Capital cooperated to avoid being charged as a participant. Its records showed that Adrian had promised the firm permanent control of 3 Valenti shipping terminals in exchange for enforcing the fraudulent default. The $24 million Luca had mistakenly restored was frozen before it could leave the Continuity Trust. The full reserve returned to Valenti Shipping after Helena's court-supervised review. Marcus survived to face charges for attempted murder, kidnapping, unlawful surveillance, and financial fraud. He claimed Adrian had threatened to expose his role in crimes committed under Luca's father, but coercion did not erase the choices he had made. Adrian was charged with conspiracy, wire fraud, attempted asset seizure, and arranging the attack on Isabella's convoy. The legal consequences would take years. The personal ones began immediately. 3 days later, Isabella returned to the board chamber with her shoulder supported by a medical sling. She wore a deep blue dress and the one gold earring that had survived the overpass. The broken one remained inside an evidence bag. Every director, captain, and senior employee who had witnessed her accusation was present. Luca stood at the same end of the table where he had denounced her. Isabella Reed did not steal from this family, he said. She protected its employees, its lawful assets, and even the man who refused to believe her. I trusted rank over evidence, blood over judgment, and control over the person whose work made my authority possible. He did not mention Adrian's deception as an excuse. I humiliated her publicly. I endangered her by placing her in compromised custody. I repeated an accusation after the evidence supporting it had begun to fail. Those were my decisions. He ordered the original accusation removed from every corporate record and replaced with the court certificate and Isabella's protective statement. He restored the salaries of the employees suspended during the crisis, paid Ethan's family relocation and legal expenses, and placed Naomi's clinic under independent, not Valenti security until the trial ended. Then he offered Isabella the position of chief financial officer, a board seat and authority equal to his over every corporate transaction. She declined. The room reacted with more surprise than it had shown when she returned alive. I will not accept power that exists because you grant it, Isabella said, and I will not remain inside a structure where loyalty is treated as obedience. Luca's face tightened, but he did not argue. What do you want? An independent forensic firm, my own clients, my own employees, and no Valenti ownership. If your company wants my services, it can submit to the same contract and oversight requirements as everyone else. Agreed, I haven't given you the price. A faint smile touched his mouth. I assume it will be painful. It will be fair. You may find that more difficult. 6 weeks later, Isabella Reed Forensic Advisory opened in an office overlooking the East River. Ethan became its Director of Systems Integrity after completing an independent certification program funded through a public Valenti restitution grant rather than Luca's private money. Isabella's shoulder healed without miraculous speed. For several weeks, she needed help fastening dresses and carrying files. She accepted assistance from Naomi, from Ethan, and eventually from Luca, but only when she asked for it. Luca did not demand forgiveness. He attended the hearings. He surrendered records that damaged his own standing. He removed the remaining criminal operations from Valenti Shipping and accepted federal monitoring of its legitimate business. Each decision cost him money, alliances, and the illusion that power meant never yielding. He visited Isabella's office only by appointment, 3 months after the board meeting. He arrived carrying 2 coffees and a contract marked with red corrections. He placed her cup on the left side of the desk, exactly where she preferred it. Isabella reviewed the agreement. You accepted every oversight clause. You were right about all of them. That must have hurt. Less than losing you. She looked up. Do not confuse regret with love, Luca. I don't. He met her eyes without command or expectation. Love is why I want to stay. Regret is why I understand. You may tell me to leave. For a moment neither spoke. Then Luca asked, have dinner with me. Isabella, the same invitation he had offered before everything broke, but this time he stood in her office beneath her name, waiting for her decision. Is that an order from my client? No. An attempt to purchase forgiveness? No. She closed the contract, then asked properly. His expression softened. Isabella Reed, would you choose to have dinner with me tonight? She let him wait just long enough to understand that her answer belonged entirely to her. "Yes," she said, "but I choose the restaurant." Luca smiled. "Of course you do.